But I wanted to start off just showing where we're seeing the best rent growth. Um, and not unsurprising, we're really seeing the best rent growth in tertiary markets. Tertiary markets, not all tertiary markets, but there are tertiary markets that, because of their economic base, their proximity to other larger secondary markets and primary markets, as well as their cost of living, have really put them in a favorable place to outperform during the COVID crisis and during the economic downturn. And so you look here on the left side, you see markets like Portland, Maine, Boise, Mobile, Chattanooga, Greensboro, North Carolina, Lexington, Huntsville, Columbia, South Carolina. These are all really good markets and mostly spread across the country. But what makes these markets unique is that they have very strong and diverse economies, very stable economies. You look at some of the markets on the right, and yeah, they have huge economies. They're the New Yorks and the San Franciscos of the world, the Bostons and the DCs, but they have incredibly high costs of living. And so what we're seeing, not only are people working from home and working from home for quite an extended period of time, and they're able to relocate. The tech companies in Silicon Valley really led this charge and said, you know what, no one has to be back until July of next year. So what a lot of people did in San Jose and Silicon Valley and San Francisco, they said, fantastic, I'll give up my year-long lease and I'll move to Boise. Boise's becoming kind of this next tech center. A lot of people are interested in Boise. There's a lot of development in Boise, a lot of growth in Boise. And people are moving out of California. They're moving out of Seattle. They're moving out of Denver, where I'm based, and choosing a market like Boise. Portland, Maine is a similar experience from Boston. You see Boston over here on the right, negative 2.2% rent growth on a trailing 6-month basis. That's really looking at March to September. And you contrast that with Portland, Maine, which is the fastest growing of our 130 markets over the past 6 months. So there's really this movement to tertiary markets. And I know a lot of you are invested in tertiary markets, looking at tertiary markets. And I would really encourage you to continue to look in those markets. Really where we're seeing the best growth, the strongest growth, and the ability to ride through the pandemic is in some of these tertiary markets.
Chris, can you explain to us, define tertiary and secondary markets for those folks that are here?
Certainly. So I guess I'll start with the primary markets. And the primary markets, in my view, and I know some people will look at it differently if you have a specific regional bent. I know brokers can look at it differently, and some property managers can look at it differently as well. But when I think of primary markets, I think of the gateway markets, the large coastal markets, and there are really 6 of those. It's Boston, New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. Then you get into what I would call the secondary markets, and they're usually anywhere from 20 to 30, maybe 35 secondary markets that people refer to. And I would look at metros that have populations of 1 million to 1 million and up. So when I think of the secondary markets, I think of markets like Philadelphia on the East Coast, Richmond, Virginia, Orlando, Miami, coming across into the Texas markets. Houston, Dallas, Austin are all secondary markets. Denver is a secondary market. Seattle, Portland, San Diego are secondary markets. Minneapolis, Indianapolis, Columbus, Ohio, Pittsburgh. Those would all be secondary markets. And then the tertiary markets are metros and metropolitan areas that I would say loosely have 1 million people or less. And you see a lot of those markets over here on the left. Some of these might be secondary markets, some of these might be tertiary markets. But if you want kind of a loose definition, I would say around 1 million people in the metro, 1.5 million people in the metro might be the distinction there.